48 hours after America's only prisoner of war, 28-year-old bergdahl, was freed from years of captivity under Afghan militants in exchange for 5 Taliban prisoners, celebration has turned into political battle. Already, Republican members of Congress are accusing the administration of breaking the law, a law that requires the defense secretary to notify Congress at least 30 days before making any prisoner transfers. The White House insists that it had to move quickly with the transfer in order to save Sergeant Bergdahl's life, a line Buck McKeon, chair of the House Armed Services Committee, is not buying.
My perception is, and I think in the eyes of many, he broke the law by not informing Congress 30 days before. We will be holding hearings. I'm sorry that this is being portrayed as a Republican issue. I think Democrats also voted for this law. This is not a partisan issue. It's just a matter of the law and breaking the law.
Legality isn't the only thing critics are taking issue with. Given that the five Taliban prisoners released were said to be some of the most dangerous prisoners held at Gitmo, questions are also emerging as to whether negotiating with the Taliban was really the right thing to do.
If you negotiate here, you've sent a message to every al-Qaeda group in the world that there is some value now in that hostage in a way that they didn't have before. That is dangerous.
I do not think the way to deal with terrorists is through releasing other violent terrorists.
These are the highest high-risk people. It is disturbing that these individuals would have the ability to re-enter the fight, and they are big, high-level people, possibly responsible for the deaths of thousands.
Joining me now is political editor and White House correspondent at the Huffington Post, Sam Stein, and senior national security correspondent for the Daily Beast, Josh Rogan. Josh, you make the case fairly eloquently and exhaustively today in the Daily Beast that one of the motivations behind all of this back and forth over Bergdahl is trying to close Guantanamo Bay. Tell us more about that thesis.
Thanks. What we were able to report today in the Daily Beast was that there's a lot of concern on Capitol Hill, mostly amongst Republicans, but not only Republicans, that now that President Obama has shown that he can release dangerous Taliban prisoners from Guantanamo and that Congress can't really do anything to stop him, that he might use this authority to pursue further releases in advance of his stated goal in his State of the Union address to close the prison by the end of the year, or at least get as close as he can. Now, Congress voluntarily gave up a lot of its oversight authority last year in the defense bill, and now there's buyer's remorse as they realize that they really don't have any power to enforce what seems to be the administration ignoring the law about notification. But the problem is Congress will be hard-pressed to act in the next few months because there's nothing going on in terms of congressional bills. So any changes that they want to make to tighten the restrictions on releasing Gitmo prisoners won't come until after the year is over. So Obama does have a free hand here. It's not clear if he's going to use it given the quickly changing politics of the issue, but that's the concern on Capitol Hill, that this could be the first of a series of releases from Guantanamo.
Sam, how'd you read this? Dan Murphy in the Christian Science Monitor makes this point, which I think is also really relevant. Dealing with people you find odious, your enemies, in this case the Taliban, is how most wars end. And we know that the president's focus has been very, very much concentrated on the wind down of the war in Afghanistan in the last week, not only with his speech at West Point, but of course his trip to Bagram on Sunday. How did you interpret the goings-on this weekend?
Well, I interpreted it as this is probably the worst issue possible to debate over Twitter. It's not something that lends itself well to 140 characters. There's nuance and there's gray areas and there's trade-offs by definition when you do prisoner exchanges like this. And, you know, it makes for people being disappointed on each side, but no position is absolute in this case. And, you know, I was talking to some administration officials about this, and they made that same point. They said this is how you end hostilities. And what is the alternative? Were you supposed to leave him there as a prisoner of war? Were you supposed to send in a troop, a group of soldiers to extricate him through military means? There's risks to that too. So it's an incredibly complex issue that we're sort of looking at through the lens, a very partisan lens, and it's almost uncomfortable in a way.
But Josh, I mean, when we talk about our enemies and winding down wars, what kind of imports do you put on this back and forth with the Taliban? And Mullah Omar, in a statement after the release of the 5 Taliban prisoners in Gitmo, said, "We shall thank Almighty for this great victory." Is this, I mean, the White House has been very careful to say this does not represent anything broader in terms of negotiations with the Taliban. But,
right.
but do you think it does?
Yeah, I mean, it could. The bottom line, first of all, the Taliban claims victory for everything, so we shouldn't put all our faith in Taliban statements. But Sam is exactly right here that the context here is that, you know, we have long had relations with the Taliban. We did negotiate directly with them, the State Department and the White House, in 2011 and 2012 on this issue. The deal at that time under Hillary Clinton's State Department was that this prisoner swap would be a confidence-building measure towards a broader political reconciliation with the Taliban. That was the deal. The Taliban didn't want that deal. They just wanted a prisoner swap. Ultimately, that's what they got. So the goal has always been to negotiate with the Taliban. This is not really precedent-setting. As we see, there are lots of other Americans imprisoned all over the world in terrible countries who are not making deals for. This is a special case because he was an American troop captured in an armed conflict. And the bottom line is that, yes, we talk with odious people all the time. That's how the real world works.
Hey, Sam, one of the sort of political, you know, one of the things that makes this politically inconvenient for Republicans, especially who are critical of this move, is that if you criticize the administration's move, you have to then criticize the release of an American POW. And what we've begun to see in the past few hours, I think, past few days, is a sort of caveat about whether or not Bo Bergdahl is in fact an American POW in the classic sense of the word. There is a lot of questioning about whether or not he left the base, whether, you know, he deserted, you know, his country's forces. It brings to mind Michael Hastings' 2009 piece, which featured an email that Bo Bergdahl wrote to his parents in which he said, "I'm sorry for everything here. These people," referring to the people of Afghanistan, "need help, yet what they get is the most conceited country in the world, telling them that they are nothing and that they are stupid, that they have no idea how to live." How much does that matter in the political discourse over this?
Well, this brings me back to my gray area point, which is that, you know, there's complexities to him. He obviously wandered off the base. There's questions about whether he deserted. We lost soldiers in an effort to track him down, to find him. So there's that element. People were mining his father's Twitter account last night, pulling up old tweets of him being critical of U.S. foreign policy, calling for the release of people, of prisoners at Gitmo. So it's not as if he's this, you know, Hollywood creation of an ideal soldier. Clearly, there's issues. But then you look around and you say, well, what's the alternative? Should we have left him in a Taliban prison and said, you know what? You deserted your base. You deserve to stay there? Of course not. There's complexities to the issue. The administration made a judgment call as to whether or not, as to how much they should give up in getting him back. And there's people who are bound to be critical of it, as there are people who are bound to cheer it.
Sam Stein and Josh Rogan. Sam, thank you as always for pointing out the complexity of the situation and the difficulty in tweeting about it. And Josh, thank you for all your thoughts as always.
Anytime.
Up next, Bo Bergdahl faces a very uncertain future back in the United States. I will talk with one of the freed American hikers held in Iran, Josh Fatal, about life during and after captivity when he joins me live in studio right after this.